Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'll be sharing with you 10 life-changing self-care habits for the highly sensitive person. And these are things that we can do for ourselves to keep feeling good mentally, emotionally, and physically. 15 to 20% of all people are highly sensitive, and this means that we process stimuli more deeply because of differences in our nervous system. It comes with many advantages, such as being creative, observant, insightful, and we have a strong sense of intuition, empathy, and resilience. But it also means that we can feel overstimulated much more easily, and that is where self-care can play a very big role. Even if you don't think of yourself as a highly sensitive person, I think you can still find some gems here, just some really helpful self-care habits for those lower energy days. This video is heavily inspired by the book The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. This is an amazing book. I will leave it in the description box for you. But a lot is also just based on my personal experience. Some things that I've been doing for years and that I just find to be very helpful. So as always, feel free to take from this video what you think can work for you and leave the rest. Number 1, retreat. So there's a self-test in this book with a bunch of questions, and if you answer yes to the following one, then this self-care habit is going to be very helpful for you. I find myself needing to withdraw during busy days into bed or into a darkened room or any place where I can have some privacy and relief from stimulation. I had to laugh out loud when I first read that one because it is literally what I do. I go into our bedroom, I close the door, I shut the curtains, I have on this kind of like low, pleasing, soothing light and some soothing music, and then I read a book or drink a cup of tea. This works wonders, and it's not strange because this is how us HSPs recover from overstimulation. And the good thing is that we do get overstimulated much more quickly, but we also recover nicely when we take some time for it. So if you feel like this is what you need to do, then try to give that to yourself somehow instead of pushing that feeling away. So when I was still working in an office, sometimes I would take a bathroom break if I felt like this. I didn't need to go to the bathroom, I just wanted to be by myself for a few minutes, or I would actually sometimes go to the cafeteria in this little corner where no one could find me to just decompress somewhere quiet for a few minutes. Number 2, take a healing shower or bath. There is something truly healing about water, and this is something that I've always found to be true and was surprised to read it in the book as well. So drinking a glass of water when you're feeling emotional, or walking along the beach or near a lake, or taking a shower or a bath. For me, this is the ultimate self-care activity for low energy days. And I've actually read studies that show that taking a bath can activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system responsible for relaxation. It slows down our heart rate, it lowers our blood pressure, it promotes digestion, and I always find that when I'm taking a shower, I start to, after a few minutes, I start to sigh, and it really feels like I'm letting something go, and I always come out feeling more relaxed and less anxious. So my advice, every once in a while, to take a shower or a bath where you just enjoy the shower or the bath. So you're not doing anything else like productive in there, you're not washing your hair or shaving or anything else. Just enjoying the warm water, the steam, and allowing yourself just that me time. It's really magical. Number 3, gentle and joyful exercise. We all need exercise, and HSPs do as well. It is great for reducing overwhelm and creating a sense of empowerment. Regular exercise has also been associated with greater resilience to acute stress and can lower high cortisol, which we will talk more about later because that is very important for us HSPs. And many HSPs, including me, grew up to kind of hate exercising because of PE, which is the highly sensitive person's nightmare with the loud children and the scary, difficult exercises and the bossy teachers making us do things that don't feel right for our body. I used to get a really bad stomach ache every time PE came around because I hated it so much, and I never would have thought that I would come to love exercising later in my life. Now, exercising is the best thing that I can do for my mental health, for my physical and emotional health, and for reducing overwhelm in my life. But the key thing here is gentle and joyful exercise. Nothing that depletes my body's resources, but instead replenishes them. Of course, walking is amazing, especially if you can do it somewhere in nature or in a park. For me, I try to go for a walk at least once every 2 days. Then yoga, some strength training, dance workouts that you find fun, anything that you find enjoyable and doable. It is okay to kind of meet your physical boundaries and seek them out, but you never have to cross them. Punishing your body and crossing your physical boundaries does not help if you are a highly sensitive person. It only causes extremely long recovery times. It puts a lot of stress on the body. It does more harm than good. So learn to love exercising by making it gentle and joyful and working with your body instead of against it. Number 4, take care of your home environment. We all know that our home environment affects us and that mess and clutter can have a negative effect on our well-being and possibly increase stress and anxiety. And I think this is probably even more true for us HSPs. Many species, and we know of more than 100 so far, have a minority that is highly sensitive. Obviously, the behavior that impacts is different for whether we are looking at a fruit fly, a bear, a fish, or a deer. But high sensitivity also means that we have higher responsivity, meaning we pay more attention to details than others do. And this means that we are more aware and more sensitive to our immediate environment and surroundings. And this makes perfect sense because part of why we see this highly sensitive minority in so many species has to do with survival. So we take in our surroundings and there is a pause to check, meaning that we take in all of this information and we process that before we take an action, which means that we can spot danger as well as opportunity more easily. So for me, minimalism and decluttering are a form of self-care, and this is probably why I started decluttering in the first place around 11 years ago. Because of my sensitivity, I realized that I constantly felt overwhelmed by all the clutter and the mess that was going on in my childhood bedroom. So I started decluttering and simplifying before I had even learned the word minimalism or decluttering. It was just that I wanted to create a space that was calm and serene, somewhere where I could feel comfortable, relax, let my guard down, and decompress from all the overwhelm that was going on in my life. For an HSP, having a calming and relaxing home environment can really be a lifesaver, and if that feels like too big of a goal for you right now, see if you can create at least one space in your home that is like that. Somewhere that can be a refuge for you when you feel overstimulated, and fill it with things that bring you comfort and relief. And if you want to learn more about minimalism and decluttering, I will leave a link to my playlist right there. Number 5, Kangaroo care. Because we have a deeper depth of processing, this also means that HSPs tend to overthink a lot, and we tend to spend a lot of time here. And so it really helps to move your awareness downwards into here and be with your body and your breath. This can be exercising, but it can also be just some gentle stretching or even sitting on the floor, doing some deep breathing, or my favorite, some self-kangaroo care. I mentioned in a previous video that I always really enjoy the touch and the smell of my own skin, and that I really calm down when, for example, I'm touching my own arms or when I'm touching my cheek to my shoulder. And someone in the comments mentioned that this is called self-kangaroo care. Kangaroo care is something you usually do with babies, so it is skin-to-skin contact. It promotes bonding, but it's also just very calming. It improves digestion, and we can do this with ourselves too. I find it super comforting and soothing. So this one is about being with your body and yourself and your breath in a non-productive way. So instead of focusing on getting fitter, getting stronger, any of that stuff, which is also good of course, but now you're just focusing on being with your body instead of working on your body, and lowering your awareness from right there to right there. Learn to identify and communicate your needs and boundaries with others. We cannot expect others to know exactly when we need some downtime, or when they could really help us by taking over a chore so that we can get some rest, or when we need alone time. So learn to check in with yourself frequently to identify your needs. And when you feel like you need something, learn to ask for it. So ask your partner or your kids or your roommate or your friend or your colleague to help you with something, or ask for a less bright light at work if that's bothering you, things like that. Boundaries are very important as well, and this can be tricky for highly sensitive people because we tend to really dislike conflict. We just want everyone to get along. We are also very attuned to the emotions of others, so much so that we often have a really hard time saying no or telling someone when they're crossing our boundaries. In terms of setting boundaries, what really helped me was sitting down and writing a list of my personal policies, which is basically a different word for boundaries, but I just think that personal policies sounds a bit more positive. So I wrote some things down that I don't do. For example, things that I'm not comfortable with or don't align with my values. I wrote down some things that I do always want to do, kind of like non-negotiables. For example, leaving one day in the weekend open when I'm not planning any social activities. And I wrote down some things that I asked of other people. For example, I get very stressed if I get a sudden phone call. So I asked people, unless it's urgent of course, please let me know in advance, send me a text that you're gonna call me, and kind of like the general thing what it's about, so that I don't get stressed by receiving a sudden call. These are just some examples, of course. Your personal policies might be very different, but sit down and write a list of things that you don't do, things you do, and things you want others to know, and use that list as kind of like a framework going forward. Scheduling white space. White space is dedicated time that you have planned in your calendar specifically to allow you to reflect, unwind, and come up for air. So this is empty time in between the rest of your activities, and because you planned it in advance, you know that you will have these little pockets of time in between. HSPs cannot keep going during the day without these little breaks in between. We need them to recenter, regroup, and move on to the next thing. So if you are used to planning things back to back or running from one thing to the next, then this tip is going to be life-changing for you. White space is why we often come up with our best and most creative ideas when we're taking a shower. It is because we're allowing our brain a little break, and everyone needs moments like that, but HSPs need them more often, so schedule them for yourself in advance. Number 8, power up your sleep. According to Elaine Aron, HSPs do worse with a lack of sleep than others, and we also take longer to recover from jet lag. She says, sorry, it comes with the territory. And she even recommends every once in a while taking a little vacation time where you're allowed to sleep however long you want if you are showing signs of sleep debt. I don't know how realistic that is for most of us, probably not. So I'm just going to say, try and get as good of a good night's rest as you can. Try and get those 8 hours, but also try to power up your sleep by improving the quality of your sleep. Sleeping and highly sensitive people don't always go together because we tend to have higher cortisol levels, which affects our sleep. So we sleep less, which increases cortisol levels, and they go back and forth. So some things that can help are implementing a sleeping and waking schedule, making sure your room is dark and not too warm, not having any screen time an hour before going to bed, avoiding large meals, alcohol, and caffeine before bedtime, and frequent exercise can also help with your sleep. Elaine Aron also recommends respecting your body's natural rhythm, so whether you are a morning person or a night owl, and she recommends if you can't fall asleep to just stay in bed with your eyes closed without worrying whether or not you're going to fall asleep. And that little piece of advice has truly been a game changer for me back when I was going through burnout and I had some insomnia. And we also need other kinds of rest. So remember those little breaks that we talked about earlier, but also, very important, prioritizing doing something fun over doing the next thing on your to-do list every once in a while, because us HSPs tend to be very conscientious and responsible, and if we don't actively do the fun things, then we just might not get to them at all. Every once in a while, remember to charge up your heart. I know this sounds a little hooey-wooey, but hear me out. One of the best things about being a highly sensitive person is that beautiful things affect us so much more deeply, and we can use that to our advantage. If you experience something beautiful, it really feels like you're charging up your heart space. So use that. Whether you love art or movies or music or books, or whether you charge up by being in nature or spending quality time with a good friend or cooking a new recipe or engaging in a creative hobby, whatever it is that lifts you up and moves you in a positive way, try to get some of that frequently. Of course, everyone needs things like that every once in a while. It's just that us HSPs tend to really feel like we can go on again after something like that, especially things that have to do with the senses. So just the smell of delicious food or the sound of birds in the sky, things like this really charge us up. So try and get some of that frequently. Number 10, try lowering your cortisol, but don't stress about being stressed. This book also talks about how HSPs are more prone to chronically elevated levels of cortisol, otherwise known as the stress hormone. And this is not because we are fragile people who cannot deal with life, it's just because of the fact that we are overstimulated a lot and our body releases cortisol levels when we feel overstimulated, for example, when we are in a loud or crowded environment. And reading this for the first time for me was again such a light bulb moment, because I have had several stress-related health issues in my life, and the doctor would always just say, try to have less stress, try to relax more. And with the exception of a few times in my life, I've never really identified as someone who is always very stressed. I'm usually pretty laid back, and I don't have any proof for this, but now I think that this was just because of my sensitivity and the fact that my body just produces cortisol more quickly if I feel overstimulated. So if you recognize this, here are a few things that can help you to manage this stress and your cortisol levels. If you're in an argument and you feel threatened or defensive, try to calm down a little bit first before you continue the discussion. Plan ahead if you're going somewhere where there's going to be a lot of stimulation. So for example, if I'm going out and there's a strong wind, I will bring something to cover my ears because strong wind overwhelms me very quickly. Improve your sleep and get enough sleep, very important for cortisol, like we talked about earlier in the video. Meditating and breathing exercises, have fun and laugh, and try to eat whole grains, fruits and vegetables, beans and legumes, and my personal favorite, green tea. But I do want to add something important here, and that is to try and not stress about being stressed. We know about stress that it can have an effect on our health and our well-being, and so we can easily feel worried about being stressed, but that's only going to stress us out further. So try to remember that stress is a part of life and it is okay to feel like that. Just try to do your best to take good care of yourself. That's really all you can do. And of course, you can always see a healthcare professional too if you feel like that would be beneficial. In the end, life can be overwhelming, and our heightened awareness and sensitivity can make us feel like the daily grind of life can be too much. But I do think that as highly sensitive people, there's really nothing that we cannot do. It just takes a bit more planning and self-care to avoid, completely crashing. Like I said before in a previous video, there's tough and then there's strong. And while sensitive people might not be super tough or sturdy in that sense of the word, we are very strong. So feel good about yourself and your sensitivity, because it is what makes you who you are. Please let me know which of these self-care habits you would like to work on the most. I always love reading your stories, so leave that in the comments. And if you want more of this kind of content, I will leave my HSP playlist right there and in the description box as well. Thank you so much for still being here and watching this video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, because that will help this video reach more people. As always, questions, comments, conversations down below. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you all again soon. Bye bye. Do you remember the Powerpuff Girls? I was a big fan when I was a kid, and I think Bubbles is the ultimate example of a highly sensitive person who's also a badass.